Live. My name is Jamie J, and I am the CEO and founder for Bottleneck Distant Assistance, and I'm your host here with Live with Bottleneck, where we try to help stop the bottleneck in your business and in your life. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Doug Thorpe, and we're going to be talking about moving from founder to CEO and what that entails. So I'm really excited. Doug's pretty freaking intelligent fella. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this. So let's go ahead and begin the show and begin this episode, I guess. And we'll talk to you on the other side in about 43 seconds. It's 2:00 p.m. Central Time, 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time. And my name is Jamie J, your host, Live with Bottleneck, where we help stop the bottleneck in your business and hopefully in your life. As you know, I do not believe in a work-life balance. I believe in a life balance. And with that, I am excited to be speaking with Doug Thorpe today. I'm also the author of Quit Repeating Yourself, how today's businesses are using systems and processes to grow their business the right way. So be able to check that out. I'll also tell you a little bit about it towards the end. But without any further ado, let me get into this and introduce you to Doug Thorpe. He's an executive coach and a business advisor. And he's going to be talking about moving from founder to CEO and why can Doug Thorpe help you stop the bottleneck in your business and possibly even your life? Well, he's a trusted advisor, an executive coach, author, podcast host, and mentor. He brings together over 30 years of executive leadership experience, business management, and a passion for growing the next generation of leaders. Love that. He loves guiding people to find clarity in their lives and at work so that those they lead can be focused. You might see a little similarity in our belief systems here, our core values in lives and at work. He's energized and inspiring. He's the only coach who can help you find easy, common sense answers to the challenges you face. Before becoming the founder and CEO of Headway Executive Coaching, he was an Army captain, a banker, and a serial entrepreneur, starting 5 different enterprises. Along the way, he created a nonprofit that aided job seekers in career transition, serving over 4,500 professionals. Without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to the one and only Doug Thorpe.
Hey, Jamie. I'm so glad to be here, man. I'm pumped just listening to you talk, man.
Well, this is fantastic. I know a lot of people, there's hits and misses on whether or not you say thank you for your service. I say thank you for your service. I served as well in the U.S. Army as an E4 when I got out. So I always had to say all the way, sir, as I walked on by. So I appreciate your service.
Well, likewise to you, as I know we've talked about in the past. But no, it was a pleasure and a privilege to do all that. And I'm happy to have been there.
That's fantastic. Well, before we jump into the conversational topic today, moving from founder to CEO, I wonder if you can kind of chime in for those of my listeners or viewers that may be watching who don't know you. Maybe you can give the quick 30,000 foot overview of how Doug Thorpe got to where you are today.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I will try to keep it brief. I think the common thread in everything is that I have been passionate about understanding and learning and executing leadership my whole life. I had some amazing opportunities in my school days to lead student organizations and be a leader among my classmates. That, as you can imagine, rolled into the Army experience where pretty much everything was about leadership, especially as a commissioned officer. And after doing that duty, I went to work for a regional bank. I lived down in the Houston, Texas area, and there was a large regional bank that hired me. And I spent 20 years in management and leadership there, building business units, running large teams, supporting bank operations and things. When I left there, I went into consulting, which is what all good bankers do when they take their early retirements from banking. They go consult with their old bank customers. I was no exception. But what I realized along the way is the business leaders that I was working with as a consultant, they wanted coaching. They needed coaching. I would get one of these, "Hey, Doug, come here, shut the door. I got something I want to talk about." And, I thought, well, okay, well, who am I to tell you? But they saw something and they just needed a sounding board. So fast forward many, many years. And yes, I had a chance, as the bio said. I started a couple of serial entrepreneur endeavors, a couple of nonprofits. Still am involved in two nonprofits today in leadership roles. But I realized that maybe there was something to this idea of coaching people to help them up their leadership game. And so I kind of reverse engineered what a lot of people do. When you talk to professional coaches for instance, those credentialed by the International Coaching Federation, a lot of them come out of academia, they come out of psychology, they come out of organizational behavior, maybe even HR, but not that many of us come from the front line. Not that many of us have that dirt still under our fingernails that, from writing paychecks and funding paychecks and the hard stuff that you've got to do when you're actually sitting in that seat. So I flipped the script and I brought all the practical experience and then put a bow on it with some coach training. So that's how I show up now. I think your mic's off, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you. You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. So I was reading, as I read through your bio, I was like, wow, I believe in a lot of what you're talking about. And one of the things, I'm actually talking about this on Friday, the difference between an expert and a pundit. And, the pundit comes from, it's a learned man, something from academia or something like that. Whereas in my opinion, and to each their own, they go about their routes. There's nothing better or worse in my opinion. It's just there's a difference there, I think. And in your case, I would consider you an expert. You actually went through it. You were in the trenches, like you said, dirt under your fingernails. And I think there's a different experience when you're coaching from experience as a mechanic that spent years underneath the hood, as opposed to someone that's gone through or taught in the mechanic school. There's a difference there. There's
And I want to be real clear. I hope nobody took what I said at first disparagingly against my other coaching colleagues. They're great people. And I mean, there's some powerful, process and effectiveness they can generate for clients. In many different scenarios, I work with teams of coaches all over the globe that are helping big organizations. I've had the privilege of being in companies as big as ExxonMobil, Coca-Cola, UPS, Regions Bank, FIS, the big fintech company, you name it. I mean, I've been up at the C-suite with those guys doing the executive coaching, but I've got a strange mix in my DNA. I was raised the only child of a hardworking single mom who had the guts and gumption to quit her day job before I ever made it to high school and start a business. Wow. And she worked her tail off doing it, and I watched her do that. I helped her with it as I got older and could help. But in the process, I built my own passion for entrepreneurship. So I have a real love. And it's interesting, my banking experience kind of dovetailed everything. As a banker, I got to see businesses both large and small. And I learned a whole lot about the privately held business, the so-called mom and pop shop is what we called it back in the day. The entrepreneur that had a great idea, tried to launch a business, but I've watched the evolution of those companies, and in my humble observation, there are some iterations that businesses go through if they are in fact on a growth trajectory. And that's one of the things you introduced my title, founder to CEO. When it comes to the entrepreneur, it's so important that the entrepreneur stays aware of the possible need that they're going to have to change along the way and grow with their business as the business is growing.
Okay, so you just mentioned it, from founder to CEO, meaning from idea to kind of operations and kind of reading the environment and seeing what's happening there. I'm a huge fan of systems, processes, workflows, things like that. And coming from corporate America for 12 years, it took me 11 years to figure out how to leave and start my own business.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot in that environment. But making that transition, yeah, great. You own your own business. There's all of a sudden all the status and, oh yeah, this is awesome. Well, there's a lot of hard work that goes on there. And one of the most challenging aspects of business, in my opinion, and I hope you can elaborate on this, I'm sure you can, growing.
Yeah.
When you grow, that's where you discover friction points and holes and get upset clients, and how do you deal with moving and navigating these treacherous waters of making that transition from founder to CEO.
Yeah, you're spot on. And you mentioned a couple of elements that I also work with and advise people to do. When I tell owners that I work with, when you stand back and think about your business, there's four basic areas that are going to be true and present in any situation. I don't care what you're doing. You're going to have people challenges. You're going to have process challenges. You mentioned process and systems. You're going to have product issues, whatever your thing is that you're doing, whether it's a service or a manufactured good, assembled good, whatever. And lastly, you're going to have performance issues, and performance covers the full gamut, but mainly it's that financial performance. Are you making any money? Is the company growing? And there are elements that, yeah, thanks for popping that up there. There are elements that show up when I start talking to owners and founders, and everything we can possibly talk about falls into one of those four buckets. But the overarching issue is back to the founder themselves. And the question is, are you willing to take a deep dive periodically and assess your own effectiveness, your own ability to lead? And sadly, I reflect on my banking days. There is a phenomenon that I call the paradox of success. When an owner gets going and his company starts growing, there's a chance that they are going to hit some tipping points and not make the pivot or not make the growth element they need to make. And the business, the momentum that they've had, all of a sudden turns into a nosedive. And the whole thing basically rattles out of control and off in the ditch. I saw it happen way too many times. As a banker, we tried to work with people, we tried to help them, we tried to keep them out of the ditch. And oftentimes, I'll be blunt, it gets down to ego. They're not willing to make that change. They're not willing to embrace what needs to be done next. And they insist on doing it the old way. And the mass that they've created up to that point takes them over the edge of the cliff.
Yeah. Oftentimes I find myself sharing, you need to get out of your own way sometimes. And part of being, in my opinion, a good leader, if I'm not learning, I'm not growing.
Right.
And recognizing different trends and being proactive and receptive to changes is especially in today's world. Technology has never moved faster, in my opinion. The world's gotten a lot smaller. Sourcing talent is easier than ever. It's still a difficult challenge, but you have such a broader market now.
Right.
And being able to understand what's happening and researching and being open to new ideas and concepts, it's like the old, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which, by the way, I found is incorrect. You can, but it just takes a little bit longer. to kind of get through that stuff. And one of the other things I'm wondering if you can talk about is, how do you present yourself, and be okay with opportunities you're uncomfortable with?
That's a fabulous question. And I think the popular term nowadays that's talked about in all the coaching circles and in a lot of the places where people talk about leadership development, the term is emotional intelligence. This idea that, am I comfortable looking inward? Am I capable of rationalizing what I just heard or saw or was told? And can I embrace it without getting upset about it? And let me give you a quick example. I wish it had been one of my case studies, but I had a guest on my podcast that shared this story. She said there was an entrepreneur in New York City. His company was kind of tech related. It had really taken off. They were doing some great things, had a good sized team of people. And one day, a couple of the team members came to him and said, "Hey, boss, is there any chance we could just shut down and go to the coffee shop up the block? Just have a talk, enjoy." And he goes, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go do that." And he thought it was going to be a moment of celebration. And he was all about, team's morale and all that good stuff. They went up to the coffee shop. They all got their coffee. They sat down and they said, "Well, the real reason we wanted to ask you here is we have a list of grievances we need to go over." and it was all about him and his management. And they said, "We are big enough. We are capable enough. We've all proven our ability to do the jobs you've put us into. Thing number one on our list is stop micromanaging. You're driving us nuts. We can do this for you. And believe us, we're on board. We want to be here." And then they went on through the rest of the list. Well, this guy, according to the story, he had the extreme emotional intelligence to say, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. Tell me more. Let's really lean into this. Tell me more." And he started, making his own notes and working through his own ideas and sharing right on the spot. And it was a real inflection, major pivot in the life of that company.
Wow, very powerful conversation. Being open to that, I think EI contributes to the leaders too that are thoughtful and respectful. And there's a fine line, and perhaps you might be able to elaborate on this a little bit. One of my challenges, and this was brought to my attention about 2 weeks ago, was stop asking so much. What do you think we should do? I had a habit of constantly making sure that I was inquisitive to the team. And I kind of flipped that a little bit. And the two words it was actually three words, but the two things that they told me to be was firm but fair. And I think that aligns there, but there's that thin line of, I definitely don't want to be a micromanager. I am so confident in the team. They are in the right roles. They're doing amazing things. I have a ton of confidence, but there's also a time where the leadership needs to kind of be leaned in on a little bit, and then disseminate that information, and then have them manipulate the route in whichever those objectives can be accomplished. Can you elaborate maybe on that thin line of maybe being too much of a micromanager as opposed to being not quite the leader you need to be?
Well, that's a great question. And I think my, first answer would be, for any element of leadership that you can identify and think about, and however you might define leadership, and I'll use your case. It sounds like one of the questions was fundamental decision making. Every one of those things is going to have that tipping point, that fine line distinction between being too much of one thing and too little of something else. And I think it is up to the leader, through any process they can use, to try to determine where the right balance comes in, and where that tipping point might be. And I'll tell you what comes to mind. I'm thinking of a story that I got out of one of my Coca-Cola executives. There's this notion of leading from the front or leading from the rear. And that's one of those that has a tipping point in it. And the point was, this lady had come from another large consumer brand, had had all her upbringing and experience there, but it was the whole dynamic of who the people were that she was leading set up a situation where, as that team operated, she could lead from the back. She could just kind of lay the parameters and point to the North Star, and they would take off and run. There was no problem with that, and they could get great things accomplished. But when she went to Coke, the truth was, the team she inherited was very accustomed to operating under a tightly controlled environment, which was the lead from the front scenario. The leader had to stand in front all the time and say, come with me, come this way, let's go here. And for her, it was she did not know the fine line tipping point. She just started out with the team with her lead from behind, and they were afraid and paralyzed. They thought that anything they did was going to be wrong. It would be ridiculed. It would be a challenge. And she had to make a change in her own line of balance there to realize she needed to move to the front, and that was going to be okay. They needed that in her leadership.
That's a really good story, and I'm sure a ton of leaders can resonate with that. I think part of, in order to avoid confusion, this is where it's super important to maintain a well thought out system with processes and workflows in place, because this really helps to set the expectation. And ultimately, it takes a while to get there, especially when there's a change in leadership, in my opinion. It does take a while to get there, but by asking or having other people on the team participate in the decision-making process for these workflows, it really helps to make them feel like they're part of the organization. It gives them a voice. They understand the tone that in which you're leading by, and it really helps to avoid a lot of conflict, in my opinion. And as a matter of fact, that's something you should have a workflow for, is conflict. Like, what happens? What do we do when that happens so that it doesn't fester?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think the challenge here is, wherever you want to put things on your list of what defines you as a leader and where and how you want to operate, it is so important that each person, whether you own the company or you're in a management role somewhere, you need to take the responsibility for defining that leadership framework that you want to represent. And I tell all of my clients, you can go out to Amazon or Google and you put in leadership, and you're going to get millions of references. You're going to get hundreds of thousands of books on it. And there's probably no one book that's perfectly correct. You have to try to read in and identify I call it leadership framework that works for you, that lines up with how you might be wired and how you might be able to show up as a leader in the situation. And again, I stress, whether you own the company or you're working as a manager for somebody else, you need to have your own definition of what personal leadership is about. Now, can you grow that and change that? Yes. The old dog can learn new tricks.
Exactly. Right. I want to point this out. It says in here, in your bio, where was it? Those can be focused. You are the only coach who can help you find easy, common sense answers to the challenges you face. Can you elaborate why Doug Thorpe? Well, and I understand this might be hard to talk about, but I really want to know.
The one underlying theme I've got for all my circles around the sun, what I've learned is there is a tendency, and it has accelerated over the last 20 years, to overcomplicate things. businesses, even small businesses, try to get so complicated in how they think they want to work. And I don't know who interjected the idea that the more complex you are, the better you are somehow, or the higher value is your delivery. But, go back to Army times. What did we learn? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And
My
I,
my my drill sergeant said something else other than stupid, but yes.
yeah, yeah. But what I say is, there are often, if you're in a leadership role and you're confronted with something, 9 times out of 10, what sounds and feels like the common sense answer to the problem is the perfect answer for the problem. And there's no point in layering on a bunch of other technicalities, a bunch of other baggage, data analysis, and all that. And I know we've got data driven decision making and all this other science that's swirling around us. But my point is, in the heat of battle, sometimes what feels like a very simple but common sense answer is the best one you could ever find. So I encourage all of my clients, don't be afraid of that. Just because you work in a highly technical world. I mean, I said I've worked at ExxonMobil. They've got, engineering considerations out the wazoo. And I mean, you just drive by and look at a refinery and you see all the pipes and the tubes and the wires and the lights and everything. And it's complex. It is complex. And yes, it's hard to manage that, but the fundamental decisions you've got to make to lead your team forward is not about pipes and wires and tubes. It's about some pretty direct opportunities that you can choose from. And most of the time, it's going to be pretty common sense. So that's the name of my podcast. I call it Leadership Powered by Common Sense, because we need that today. And if I don't do anything in my life, I want to try to, I don't like the word dumb down, because that's not what we're doing. We're not making it literally more stupid. We are just peeling away the confusion and the ambiguity of things and trying to get to the heart of the matter, connect the dots, and make the decision.
I like that. It's taking so many people get clouded, and there's so many things going on. They're so distracted with all the different elements that come along with being a leader, that oftentimes they step over a dollar to pick up a nickel, in essence. Yep. And it's hard sometimes to kind of slow down. That's where Doug Thorpe comes in, and it's a nice common sense reminder. Hey, slow down, take a breather. I get a lot of my answers by taking a breather and just doing a brain dump. Mm-hmm. And whatever comes in my head, I don't care if it's table or glass of water, launch website. I just start writing all this stuff down, and all of a sudden some clarity comes. That's just for me. It works for me. But I find some simplicity that comes out of that.
Definitely. And along that line, I often tell people, I'll have clients that, we'll start a session. I'll say, well, where do you want to go today? What do you want to talk about? And they go, I got this problem. I need to, I'm really struggling with it. Can't seem to make a decision. And I'll have them do a simple little T-chart on a tablet, pluses over here, minuses over here. Let's start listing it. And, we make the list, and then we go back through it. And I say, all right, if you want to put some weight on it, how much does this thing cost? Or how much does that thing cost? Or what's that thing worth? Or what's the impact? And we start doing some weighted average kind of things. And, before long, all of a sudden, it's just blazingly clear which way to go. It's either a yes or no, and they're able to do it. There's a term that's circulating also now in at least in the big business world. It's called VUCA. It's an acronym that came out of the Department of Defense in the U.S. back in the 80s, but it kind of died off when the Cold War died, and a reference to business. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And boy, if that doesn't decide or define business of the last 2.5 years, when business went into the pandemic lockdown, what did we have? Uncertainty like no other time before us. We didn't know when we were going to go back to work. We didn't know how we were going to get work done, at least not for a short period. And then it got complex because how do you link all your remote people together? How do you align with all this stuff, and on and on and on. So volatile. It was certainly chaotic, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, if you're a leader facing that every day, what in the hell are you going to do? You got to have your head on. You got to have your head on straight. And as the football guys like to tell us, your head better be on a swivel. You better
Yeah.
be looking and paying
Well,
attention.
they told us that in the Army too.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, it was so there. You're right. Nobody really knew because and that isn't that a direct contributor to stress or anxiety,
oh yeah,
just not
totally.
knowing.
Just not knowing. Yeah, and there's a phrase that I like to use. I need to look up one day who said it the first time. It says a confused mind says no. I think I actually heard that from a sales trainer, and his point was when you're out doing the sales game, you don't want to overload your prospect with too much data because if you get them confused, they're automatically going to say no. But if you give them clarity, they're going to be more inclined to say yes. I think the same thing applies to our teams, the people that work for us. If we overload them with complexity and ambiguity, they're going to be confused and what? They're going to say no.
Yep. They're gonna leave and they're gonna want to do something else that's not because we've moved from we don't know what we don't know to we know what we don't know. And what's people often say, what's the difference? Well, when the pandemic started, we reevaluated our system, our processes, and our workflows. And we poured ourselves heavily into the infrastructure of the organization. And we felt that that would be a really good move so that we can come out on the other side of this thing with a new kind of new system in place.
Yeah.
And what that did is, while we may not know the outcome of something, we knew what we didn't know, meaning we knew the process that we needed to take or the action that we needed to take in order to achieve the objectives for something that we didn't know. And that, believe it or not, really helped us hold our composure, keep our composure together. And it really helped us grow through a really challenging time. Does that make any sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. And as you were describing all that, I was thinking about a couple of case studies I know of here in the Houston area that were driven by the pandemic. There was a family-owned Chinese restaurant that, of course, restaurants shut down basically because you couldn't have people in, you couldn't serve open meals like you did, and their business was dying. But they figured out that they had a really nice, great, popular recipe for boiling crawfish. Down here in the Texas Gulf Coast, we love our crawfish, right? So these people figured out how to boil crawfish real effectively, and they were selling them in bulk to people. So it was takeout food, and it wasn't your traditional Chinese by any means. It was some good old-fashioned Gulf crawfish. But they basically converted their whole business. They shut down the storefront. They cut their rent by 2/3, going into a small kitchen. That's all they needed. They didn't need to show it off to the public. They just needed to pass the health inspection, right? And they started boiling crawfish, and selling it in bulk. Well, their margin doubled, their volume tripled, and they didn't have any of the pain of serving customers in the restaurant.
Wow. Do they still do that to this day?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They said, why are we're never going to go back to that other deal.
I love stories like that. That's fantastic. Well, out of respect for your time, because we've gone a little bit over here and I want to respect your time as promised. So I wonder if you could share with us, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, and who is that person that perfect person that Mr. Doug Thorpe can help out?
Great question. First off, the primary link, just hop over to my website. It is DougThorpe.com, and that's THORPE with the N. I know I have some distant relatives without the E on the end, but I have the E, so DougThorpe.com. Got a lot of information, a lot of pages. And if you want to really drill into the founder to CEO, put a slash business at the end of that, DougThorpe.com/business. I've got a whole separate flow of information. There you go, about the founder to CEO idea. The ideal client that I would love to be able to help and work with is the owner founder that has had some success. Maybe you're already in the multi-million-dollar revenue line, but you feel like you're bumping your head. You feel like you're stuck, stalled. You've tried a lot of different things to bust through some kind of invisible wall to get to the next level, but it's just not there yet. You're the guy I want to talk to, and you're the guy that I really believe I can help the most, guy or gal that I can help the most. So hop over there and to those links, and would love to talk with you.
Perfect. And then you're on social, LinkedIn and Facebook and the YouTubes and Twitters and all that kind of stuff.
Right. All over it.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say before we wrap?
Oh my, I feel like we just sort of scratched the surface a little bit here, but I think the one thing I guess I'll say, it's always on my heart. I think if you own a business or if you're put in a position to lead a team, there is a distinct difference between management and leadership. And if you never had the opportunity to dive in and understand or explore what leadership is about and how much different that is from pure management, now may be the time to do it, because I promise you that if you can up-level your skills as a leader, you will help break through that invisible wall that might be holding your business back right now.
Wow. Words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing, Doug. It's amazing. I just can't thank you enough for stopping by today and sharing with us. And I'm kind of glad we didn't get too deep into things, because it leaves a lot of anticipation, right? Well, do you have a moment to hold on, and I'll go ahead and wrap up for us?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I've been talking with Doug Thorpe. Go learn more. You can go to Doug Thorpe with an E at the end of Thorpe, by the way, .com. And if you want to go learn more about moving from that founder position to the CEO position, go to DougThorpe.com/business. And he has a quick overview on that as well. You can search for him all over social media. Today, as we've been talking, we've talked about moving from founder to CEO. Doug Thorpe's an amazing executive coach and business advisor. He's definitely been there and done that. I would encourage you, if you are in a position where you're kind of stuck and you're hitting your head against the wall a little bit and you're looking for that next level, please do yourself a favor and give yourself an opportunity. At least visit the site, DougThorpe.com. If you want to learn some insights about how you move from more of that founder to that more CEO leadership style, go to DougThorpe.com/business. If you'd like to watch more episodes similar to this and learn how you can break through the bottleneck in your business, go to bottleneck.online/BTV. That stands for Bottleneck Television. It's basically YouTube. And we have a bunch of shows like this, or episodes like this. And as I mentioned in the beginning, quit repeating yourself. My book is out, How Today's Leaders Are Using Systems and Processes to Grow Their Business the Right Way. You can go to quitrepeatingyourself.com to learn more. Again, we've been speaking with Doug Thorpe, executive coach and business advisor, and we talked about moving from founder to CEO. If you missed it, we flipped the roles, and my executive vice president, an unbelievable Gordon McDougall, interviewed me, and we talked about a growing number of marketing agencies are hiring remotely. And we talked about why that's happening and how the kind of, as Doug mentioned, you got to pay attention to the trends and where things are changing. And we kind of discussed a little bit like that. Coming soon to your earbuds, leadership consulting and your bottom line. We're going to be talking with Ram Lapointe. He's founder and CEO of Capricorn Leadership. That's coming up Wednesday, July 27th. 2022 at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. Again, today we were talking with Mr. Doug Thorpe, executive coach and business advisor. Amazing human being. Very, very smart, well-crafted, and will have tons of ideas for you to execute against and really scale your business. So if you're stuck, reach out to Doug. And that's all I'll say, except for one last thing. If you kind of notice, I'll flip the screen up here. Create your own ripple. Just do it. Create your own ripple. All right. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.